This is something to talk about from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. We are grateful for sponsorship from Fieldstone Memory Care on Bainbridge Island. Fieldstone is offering innovative and compassionate care at their beautifully appointed apartments on Rolling Bay. To schedule a tour, jot down this number, 360-271-2530, Fieldstone Memory Care. Today, we're going to be talking about One Call for All, which is a very valuable homegrown philanthropy that helps a number of organizations in a number of ways. And we have John Green, who is on the board, and in fact, the president, I believe, right, John? No, you're a former president or something. He's nodding and shaking his head. And Tracey Denlinger, who is the executive director. Hi, Tracey. Hi, John.
Hi.
So One Call for All, can you tell us just a little bit about the organization and in a thumbnail, sort of its history and the fact that it's a little, I mean, I know there have been kind of community chest organizations around the country, but this one has been pretty successful and long-lived.
It sure has. So John, do you want to start or would you like me to?
I'll charge ahead with the thumbnail and then Tracey will sweep up all of the detritus of my presentation. So anyway, One Call's been on Bainbridge Island for over 60 years now. It is a nonprofit organization that solicits and raises money for other nonprofits on the island. That is our sole mission. We send out a single solicitation in the fall. It comes in a red envelope, and that's what I was leaning in. I was looking for one, and you'd think I'd have one sitting at my desk, but I don't. Single solicitation. This year, we're raising money for over 120 nonprofits that serve our community.
Oh, Tracey, what have you got there?
That's what that envelope is. So, and things we're proud of is we're taking care of, help raise money for the community in a bunch of different areas. There's education nonprofits, there's environment and taking care of the land nonprofits. There are social service organizations like the Senior Center. There are youth sports groups, the whole gamut of things. And, you know, I think one of our most prideful things is that when you make a donation through One Call for All, the entire amount of your donation goes to the organization that you'd like it to. So if someone wants to give the Senior Center $100, the $100 that One Call for All takes in all goes to the Senior Center. And
how does that work? Because obviously there might be, credit card fees, that kind of thing.
Okay, so we are also, One Call for All is a nonprofit organization and we raise money for our operations. And one of our biggest parts of our budget for operations is paying of the credit card fees. So if someone makes a donation on our website and we incur a fee with the bank, we pay for the fee so that the entire amount of the organization, the entire amount of the donation goes to the partner organization like the Senior Center. That makes a donation going through One Call for All about 2% more valuable to the organization that's receiving it.
Yes, it's a delightful thing to get those nice round numbers. I can speak for the Senior Community Center that way. So I know that when I get my red envelope or go online, I have an option of donating directly to One Call for All, which is helping to support that kind of fee underwriting. Are there other ways that you raise money directly for One Call for All?
We raise all our money also through the Red Envelope campaign. We have people that give to us at any time of year. You can always donate through One Call. It's not just a fall fundraising drive. We do some appeal like peer group. I talk to friends and say, hey, when you're making your donation, would you consider giving money to One Call for All? Because a gift to One Call is like a gift to all the nonprofits on Bainbridge Island, because it makes it possible for us to raise money for the other organizations.
Great. So when you're filling out that red envelope next year, you might think about adding OCFA as one of your recipients.
I would think of it sort of like when you check out at a restaurant and they flip the iPad around for you and it says, do you want to add a tip? At the end of considering your donation to your 10 organizations, your 20 organizations that you're supporting, you get a chance at the end to give money to One Call for All. And we'd appreciate if you do that because it helps us do the work in the community that that drives us to be involved with it and help take care of things like the senior center. Okay,
And
Tracy.
Tracy is there all year long, because I know that you help organizations with conversations in addition to just distributing money. You do things like brown bags. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So yeah, our mission is really kind of twofold. One is to serve donors on Bainbridge Island. So it's convenient for a donor to be able to select all of the organizations that they care about, that they'd like to contribute to, and divide up a single donation, either, you know, a check, a credit card donation, a recurring donation can be divided up among as many as 125 organizations. So it's a convenience for the donor. You know, the placeholder, I'll talk about more complicated gifts that One Call for All can make more simple for the donor. But we also, obviously, as John pointed out, we serve our nonprofit community. So I always like to say I'm the development director for 125 different organizations on the island, because although I know, Reed, you want to actually hire a development director, that'll work too. Also, that person. One of the things that we know about our nonprofit sector is that the things that they do in our community are what they are good at and what they should be spending more of their time, more of their money, and more of their volunteer resources doing. So the senior center needs to be serving senior citizens and, you know, helping that particular constituency thrive. Helpline House needs to be delivering food and social services, and One Call for All is here to kind of take on the nitty gritty, not just the, you know, paying the credit card fees and paying for the red envelope and soliciting all of that money, but actually just doing the minutia of boring stuff that isn't why Reed Price chose to work for the senior center. It isn't why these organizations exist. And so we really like to be able to sort of take over for that. And another thing that we've been doing for the past 5 or 6 years is to be able to support the nonprofit sector throughout the calendar year, not just doing the fundraising, but also trying to create sort of a sense of collegiality among those of us who are leading volunteer-wise or paid positions, these nonprofit organizations that do such good in our community. And that's something that has developed into really, I think, a sense of great camaraderie and collaboration. I know Reed has come, we have these brown bag lunches, used to be in person, hopefully we'll be in person again soon, but we'll get 10 to 15 leaders and volunteers from nonprofits to sit around a table, bring their lunch, that's why it's called brown bag, and talk about issues that are relevant to nonprofit management or nonprofit fundraising, specifically on Bainbridge. Sometimes we talk about One Call for All, and we talk about how to make the most of the One Call for All campaign, how to utilize social media to help raise more money for your organization. But most of the time, the topics are not related specifically to One Call for All. So, you know, we might have, usually about once a year, we have one on board development. So we talk about, you know, utilizing our board of directors, and how do we recruit and retain and make our board members happy. We talk about volunteerism. We talk about fundraising events. We've obviously had some virtual conversations about fundraising events in the pandemic era. So it's really a chance for One Call for All, I think, to contribute to really helping our sector thrive and helping each nonprofit be healthy in whatever way. If it's through One Call for All, we want to help with that, but also we just want our organizations to be able to do the good work that they do in the community and continue to do so. So we've tried to add some value to the organization year round, not just through the annual campaign that we do.
You do an annual campaign. It just concluded. Tell us a little bit about how 2021's annual campaign ended up.
Can I go first on that, Tracy?
Yeah.
One word, many words, awesome response from the community, unbelievable generosity, unprecedented here. And anyway, I'm really excited about it. Okay, Tracy.
So it's just astounding. I mean, every year we say the same thing. I can't believe that. We live in this community full of generous people. We live in a community also full of people who care deeply about our island and our way of life here, and making sure that everyone who lives here has an opportunity to enjoy the environment and get an education and connect with our fellow citizens and participate in the arts. Our community is fabulously generous, and this year, so for our campaign actually runs year round. We haven't had a day without a donation in like 4 years. But we do most of our annual campaign is in the fall through December 31st is what we consider the active phase of our campaign. And so starting in August and ending December 31st-ish, our campaign has raised $2.3 million for the nonprofits on Bainbridge that serve Bainbridge Islanders. And that is just, I mean, John tried to come up with words, awesome.
A record.
It's absolutely, it's not just a record though, because it increases every year. And, partly it's a factor of, new organizations coming into the campaign. It's also a factor of new, strategies for giving. It's also a factor of the economy. The stock market did very well in 2021. And so if people feel a little more flush, also it's a factor of, I think, our nonprofits being able to communicate the need and being able to communicate how, how well they serve their missions. And that inspires people to give more. So yeah, it's a record by a very dramatic measure. So 2.3 million so far. I think actually it might be 2.4 considering some additional checks that came in right after the first of the year. So we're just under 2.4 million for 123 participating organizations.
So I'll come to another word. It's just inspiring.
Yes.
Awe-inspiring. And, we get there's a lot of people who give a lot of money. There's some big checks that come in, particularly people giving appreciated assets and donating stock, which we are now able to facilitate. But we shouldn't discount the smaller donors because there are a lot of them and they give to a lot of organizations. And for someone that gives maybe $200 and not $2,000 or $20,000, that $200, a lot of thought goes into it. And it's a big commitment from people at that range, maybe even harder on their family budget than the person that can give $20,000. So I just send a salute to the small end donors who they drive a lot of the giving. So,
and one of the things that that is unique about this is that one check can go easily to a number of organizations. How often does that happen, Tracey? How often do people give to One Call for All and name one organization, or are they almost always naming 2 or 3 or more?
The average is 7 to 9. One thing that's sort of skewed that average a little bit is recurring donors. So we added that capacity a couple of years ago. And so the recurring donors are, it's about 50-50, I think, will give to one organization typically. And about half will give to a handful of organizations, or maybe just 2. So that has skewed that number, but the typical donation is around, it ranges from 1 to 123. Actually, this year, I don't think I've had a single donor who's given to every single organization, but most years, there is somebody who wants to do that. Or there's a few people who give to 120 organizations. So, we get to look at their donation form and try to figure out which ones are skipped. But average is 7 to 9 organizations. And the average gift is around 1,000, a little bit higher than 1,000 this year. So, these numbers, we have one family that gave $100,000 this year to about 30 organizations. And so that kind of skews the numbers. So the averages are not as interesting, I think, as the kind of individual stories. We also have had a number of people over the last several years who will give one large gift to one organization. And that has to do with One Call for All's ability to be able to handle larger donations or more complicated donations. If somebody just wants to give, I just want to give the senior center these mutual fund shares that are kind of complicated to sell. And, you know, the senior center's bank might not have the capacity to liquidate that immediately, or might not have, you know, want to dedicate their staff time to dealing with that. And so we would take the gift, disperse it immediately to the senior center, and that would still count. So that, you know, like if someone gave $100,000 just to the senior center, that would still count, you know, in setting an average. So it's a little bit harder to.
I think Reed would be happy for a $100,000 donation to come to the senior center, and I think we would all be happy if that happened. Tracey, you mentioned recurring donations. Can you explain what that is and who might avail themselves of a recurring donation?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll tell you one person, Sheila. Hi, Sheila, recurring donor right there. Actually, I think Reed's a recurring donor too. Marcy maybe as well. The senior center in particular has taken great advantage of recurring donations. So it's a way for someone to give more over time. So you might not want to write a check for $240, you know, but can you put $20 per month on your credit card? Sure, that just seems a little more palatable to most people. And we have two ways that we accept credit cards, either online on our website. So if you go to, you know, Helpline or the Land Trust or the Senior Center or Bainbridge Prepare, some of our, you know, well-loved organizations, you will see an opportunity to give a recurring donation through One Call for All on their website. And so you click on that and it allows you to be able to set it up. You'll get an email every month, usually around the 10th or 11th of each month that reminds you this is going to be charged. And then it will run on the 15th of every month. Those donations run for 1 year, either quarterly or monthly. And again, we pay all of the credit card fees. Here's something I meant to bring up a little bit earlier. In addition to us paying the credit card fees, your organization earns a share in the community fund for every donation of $20 or more. And so that means that if somebody, you know, John's example of $100, he may have said that, but if you want to give $100 directly to the senior center and you do it via credit card, if you accept credit cards, the senior center would get $97. But if you wanted to instead give, you know, $100 through One Call for All, you'd get the full $100 plus a share in the community fund, which last year was around $5, just under $5. So when someone's giving $20 a month, you actually are earning the organization 12 shares in the community fund. So, you know, that can definitely add up in addition to having us pay the credit card fees. So
that's $5 of the per share, right?
Yes. So a $20 donation, if you give 12 times, that's 12 times 5. The math is easier on that. It was actually $4.67 or something like that. So, but yeah. It
ended up for us to represent about $2,000, a little more than that actually last year, because of those recurring donations, which came from the community fund, which is another part of the envelope that you can donate to as well, right?
Yep.
So
if you want to support this kind of you know, sort of multiple donation activity, you can do it by giving to the community fund.
Right. So the community fund is almost like another nonprofit. If we get some donors who they're basically saying, we just want to support the Bainbridge community, and they make a donation to the community fund, and then at the end of the year we make a calculation based on how many donations each organization got, regardless of size, and then we split up the community fund. So it comes into us as undesignated, and then it gets split up when we make the distributions. So
we also have that community fund it's a repository for people who send us money and don't tell us where to give it. So for instance, right now I have sitting in my community fund an $11,000 stock donation that stock donations are transferred electronically. So there's no information about who the donor is or where they want the money to come from. So it's just sitting in our community fund right now. And I really hope whoever donated that comes forward and lets me know, A, that it's them, so I can acknowledge it, and also B, which organizations they'd like to choose and how they'd like that divided up. But right now it's just sitting in that community fund. And if I don't hear, we will divvy that up among all of the organizations based on the number of donations they've received in the campaign for the year. We do that in August, by the way. Our campaign year runs from August 1st through July 31st of each year.
But you do make a mark of sort of where you are in December. That's the number that we just talked about.
Yeah, so our
$2.3
active phase of the
million.
campaign, most of the money comes in during the active phase of the campaign, which is roughly October through January. And then we also we distribute the money twice a year for the organizations for the most part. We also will do an early distribution. We don't want to just hang on to a bunch of cash that a donor wants to get to the organization, but we typically give one big check in January, which the Senior Center has already received, as have all of our 120 organizations. And then we, in August, we will give anything that they've raised since January 1st-ish, all the way through July 31st, plus their shares of the community fund. So we'll do that calculation. We'll figure out how much is in the community fund and how much each share is worth and how many donations each organization earned.
Outside of the idea that it's just outstanding and enormously wonderful, the amount of money that you received this year. You've both been involved in this for several years. What other things stand out to you that might have been unusual or even unique about this year's active campaign? Particular, maybe not organizations, but kinds of things that people seem to lean to support, or maybe the number of people who gave, or the average increase or whatever of donations. Just some observations about things that were unusual this year.
I would say the biggest thing that I've noticed that's different is people giving from their required minimum distribution from their IRA. So certainly the Senior Center has been a recipient of those donors' organizational choices. We hear frequently from folks who give small amounts every year, or maybe they're an annual donor to one organization or more, who give at a lower amount or an average amount. And then when they realize their financial advisor tells them, or they read an article, or they see something online and they realize they're required to take, if they're 72 and a half, I think, or maybe it's 72 even now, required to take money out of your IRA. And if you donate that directly to an organization, then you don't have to pay income tax on that. So you actually are able to reduce your taxable income by just sending that money straight to the nonprofit, rather than taking it, having an income tax on it, or getting a tax deduction by donating it, which is fine too. You're able to completely remove that from the taxable income equation. So we have seen folks be able to give in a much bigger, splashier way than they have before, when they've realized this is a tool that is, meant to help the nonprofits raise more money. One thing about One Call for All is that when you make it's called a qualified charitable distribution, QCD. And when you make that, you need to give the nonprofit's EIN number or tax ID number, and it needs to be a qualified nonprofit. And so that's the research that you have to do. We do that research for all of our recipient organizations. So donors can give through One Call for All. They can just have their whole charitable contribution through One Call for All, and then we can divide it up among all the organizations. So, for instance, like I said, the average person gives a 7 and 9, but if somebody is giving a larger amount, it is typically even higher number of organizations than that. So instead of having to do the research of finding the EIN and the contact, you need to have a physical address for each of those organizations. Just give it to One Call for All. It's a gift to One Call for All. You need one EIN. You're going to get one acknowledgement letter. You're going to have only one person that you have to call and talk to and ask questions about, how do I do this? And then send One Call for All the donation form that says how you'd like it divided up. And then we just match that up. So we've added the past couple of years, this is the form, this is the donation form that folks fill out if they're not giving online. But there's a little box here that says a check will be forthcoming. And so I have a little tickler file on my desk, and sometimes I'll get a check first, sometimes I'll get the donation form first, but it's very easy to match it up. All the organizations get the donations. The donor gets to just do one transaction. I mean, obviously some donors want to give off island as well, and they might have, you know, organizations that are national in scope that they'd like to give to too, but it does simplify it dramatically if you do it through one call for all. So that's, that is a trend. I'm definitely noticing, you know, I'm not sure where we are at with the average age of the population of Bainbridge Island, but everybody's getting older. And so it may be that there are just more folks that are getting into that age bracket, but I also think that there's more folks that are sharing the word about that giving technique and the convenience of being able to do that through one call for all. So we've definitely seen a lot of that.
I think another thing we've seen in the last couple of years with the spotlight on a lot of social justice issues and needs in different communities than our own, we've seen an uptick in contributions to social service organizations. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tracey, but my impression that things like Helpline have done better. The senior center has done better. In North Kitsap Fish Line in Paulsbo, which serves the whole county, the Kitsap Immigrant Assistance Center, organizations like that have seen a definite uptick in what they've been receiving through One Call for All. And I think it's about community caring about people that don't have as much going on or as much support as they need. And I think that's a real positive trend and something that's I like seeing.
So one of the things that I have heard in the past is that one of your goals year over year is to encourage people who move to the island to recognize this homegrown charitable distribution effort. And are you seeing fewer or more people each year over year participating as donors?
We're seeing a very slight increase each year. And I'm not sure if that is, you know, sort of along the same, the population growing. I do, though, this is something that comes up frequently where, you know, my board of directors and I want to make sure that we're reaching out to younger donors and making sure that, you know, young families that are moving to Bainbridge Island know about and learn about One Call for All. And one thing that I have learned in the past couple of years through talking to specifically to donors who give through the senior center is that the increase in the number of older folks who move to Bainbridge Island and learn about One Call for All through their connection to the nonprofits like the Senior Center and IVC. Because someone who's retired and moves here wants to get engaged in activities like volunteering through IVC, volunteering on boards of directors, etc. And one of the donors that I was just had in mind when I was talking about how someone can give through their IRA, somebody who had been giving about $1,000 a year the past 5 years. I've worked for One Call for All. This is my 7th campaign. So I just assumed these were kind of one of those longtime people. And I found out in talking to the woman of the couple, no, they just moved to Bainbridge 5 years ago. So they got involved with the senior center, they got involved with Barn. And so, you know, I do feel like we're doing a good job of that. We also have, you know, every year we talk a lot about like we want to make sure that we're supporting like the private schools and the preschools, because those would be younger families and often newer families. I want to say though, being a member of Gen X, I was very proud that our largest individual donor this year is a kid my age in their 50s, a couple who had been giving a couple $1,000s a year every year for the past 20 years because they're that's how long they've lived on the island. They moved here to raise children and their children are now 18 and 20. And anyway, we also had a big donor this past year who's in her 40s and a single mom. with 2 teenagers. And Reed, I'll give you the name later, but this is a really sweet story. One of your donors to the senior center is a 13-year-old boy. And so this mom and they're twins, 40-something mom she gave a big gift of appreciated assets, and they have been giving appreciated assets for the past 2 or 3 years. But she sat down with her 2 children and said, okay, we're dividing this up in thirds. Each of us get to choose which organizations. They pulled out their red envelope form. They looked on the website, they did their research, and the little boy decided to give, I think probably $1,000 to the senior center. Isn't that sweet?
That's wonderful. I hope that when he gets just a little bit older, he can come here for the Silver Tech tutoring that we do with Bainbridge Youth Services, so he can experience some of that activity firsthand. But that's wonderful news. Yes.
And maybe he'll move his comma to the right as he gets older.
What's that?
I said maybe he'll move the comma to the right one place.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, those kinds of stories are heartwarming. The idea that you this is one of the things that as I've lived on the island, that One Call for All has opened up to me are the varieties of social services and activities that are going on here. And you don't have to wait till the next year's red envelope to check it out. You have all the participating organizations listed on your website. So if anybody is interested in seeing who those 125 organizations are, all you have to do is go to onecallforall.org and look at that list. Sheila has a question.
I have a comment. This something to talk about has been, I think, a great benefit to One Call for All, because Reed has done his due diligence and gotten people and organizations on here talking about their stuff and their organization. And I learned about the dog people.
Assistance Dogs Northwest.
Oh my, I don't know if they're new or not, but all I can tell you is I was so taken with these lovely people. They were so wonderful. And I'm a critter person anyway, but still, even so, they are so wonderful, and they're it's what a wonderful organization. So I gave to them this year for the first time because of that. And I'm so pleased. And Reed does this though. He gives us new ideas.
There you go. She's showing.
Oh,
Sheila, I have a spare. This is their calendar. And
do you?
I have a spare. They dropped them off. So let's connect. I'll get you a calendar if you're interested.
Bless your heart. Thank you. That would be such fun. Thank you.
That's the extra step that having One Call for All as your neighborhood philanthropy organization can do. Look at that in action. Tracey, you wanted to mention, and you have a couple times, some of the more complicated assets. You talked about appreciated assets, which I assume are mostly stocks or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Are there more? Do you, like, if I'm trying to figure out, I don't know, property, is that anything that you would have anything to do with?
Yeah, we have an official gift acceptance policy that allows us to accept. Some nonprofits aren't allowed to accept certain kinds of property, and we have a gift acceptance policy that does allow us to do that. I specifically wanted to talk about appreciated assets like stock, because the stock market doing so well, that is actually really a common way that folks are able to give more to the causes that they care about. By giving appreciated assets, because they don't have to pay any capital gains on the increase in value. So that is something that we do a lot. And it's also just like with the IRA, how I mentioned, you can give to as many organizations as you want with one transaction. So you can pick, from your portfolio, whatever has appreciated the most, just give it to One Call for All, and I'll divide it up same way that I talked about with that. We have, I don't know if you guys are familiar, or I'm sure you've had Jim Hupper from the Bainbridge Community Foundation on. The Bainbridge Community Foundation was actually founded with assets that were was part of a bequest that was given to One Call for All. So One Call for All in the early days was called the Bainbridge Foundation. And somebody had left a piece of sort of landlocked property to One Call for All, which was then called the Bainbridge Foundation. And they liquidated that. And that was the initial corpus that founded the Bainbridge Community Foundation. So we're really kind of sister organizations and partnering in different ways. I think Rotary is another sort of third leg on the stool of supporting the nonprofit sector on Bainbridge. And they have the capacity to do things like donor advised fund or have a more complicated bequest. Those kinds of, we try to keep things really simple. We just have the money comes in, the money goes out, the money comes in, the money goes out. And the Bainbridge Community Foundation can handle those things like that. So often I will get calls from donors who say, if they do have a question about, I'd like to donate property, or I'd like to put my house in my will or estate plan to go to One Call for All, we would typically want to direct them to Bainbridge Community Foundation. Even if they wanted it to go to support the operations of One Call for All, they could still do that through Bainbridge Community Foundation. So, so yes, people can call if they have questions about donating more complicated assets, and we may be able to accept them here at One Call for All, or we may send you over to Bainbridge Community Foundation, where they have the capacity to hang on to things for longer, and you know, process or liquidate things immediately that we don't have the capacity to.
Thank you very much for coming by, John and Tracey. Any final thoughts, maybe except time for a vacation after that wild ride into the fall?
Well,
Yeah.
I have one. I will look forward to you guys opening up again and having in-person meetings, activities, exercise, coffees, music, movie night, field trips. If I missed anything, anyway, when you guys
Pretty
close
good.
down, I know it's a big hit
Good, John.
on the community, and we'll look forward to it being open again soon.
Yes, we all are looking forward to that. And we are requiring boosters for activities here. So if you do plan to come to the senior center for some activity, which we hope will be starting, I'm crossing my fingers, in the next couple of weeks, then just bring your proof of booster.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's great to hear. And I just want to say thank you to you, Reed and Sheila, Marcy, anybody else who's involved in the running of the senior center. It has just been really one of those pandemic silver linings in my mind, that you guys have been able to keep folks connected. You've done an amazing job supporting the vaccine efforts. And I just really feel like, you know, our community has weathered the pandemic so much better for having you guys around. So thank you for the work that you do. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you very much. Have a lovely afternoon.